Well, good night, everyone. That's really where we're at here. This is Michael coming to you, and I just had a thought. I've been working on something all day long, a little bit this, a little bit of that. And about the time I went to lay down in bed a moment ago, I thought, well, here's a good way to explain what's been going on in my head. So I often talk about going with the flow of all that is. And what I've come to determine and come to find out is so much of my life I spent chasing something, required a lot of effort, a lot of energy, a lot of resistance, because what I didn't realize, and I did actually partially know, that I was moving in the wrong direction. Because there was a point in time where there were many points in time where there was an option to look into what I call the mirror of truth. But when I would have those brief moments of looking in the mirror of truth, I would see that the mirror was there, and I knew deep down what that mirror might reflect back to me. And so I kept going. I wasn't going to stop. I wasn't going to stand. I wasn't going to look in that mirror. I would just keep going. And somehow, some way, everything would work itself out. The fact is, everything just kept getting more tangled up and knotted up until you have this huge ball, this huge thing that is so knotted up and entangled. And at some point, everything kind of imploded in my life, right? And not only are you left then with this knotted ball, but with the implosion comes scattered pieces of this ball all over the place. And the reason I'm bringing all of that up, because the reason I wouldn't look into that mirror of truth or that mirror of self is because I didn't want to face what I knew it would show me. It would show me that I wasn't happy. It would show me that certain things in my life were way out of alignment. Certain relationships that I was in were way out of alignment. And that some of it was me, and some of it was maybe the environment or the circumstance I was in, or the other person. And either way, it would bring up a lot of other things that I would then have to deal with. Why do I bring all this up? I bring it up because it was an aspect of trust. It was an aspect of surrender. And I refused for the longest period of time to surrender and take that moment to look in that mirror. And when you look into that mirror of truth, that mirror of self, and you become honest with yourself, you become honest about the truth of what's going on in your life. Because what is happening out here is generally a reflection of what is going on internally here that you may not even be consciously aware of for a big percentage of it. But in order to stop, in order to look into that mirror of truth, that takes an act of will. Because instead of just running the program and going, I'm just going to keep going and everything's going to work itself out, and I'm going to keep swimming upstream and hope that somehow I find my way. What the mirror of truth was asking me to do is stop, be still, and know, right? Be still and know that I am. And stopping and looking in that mirror of truth is an act of your will, where you are saying, I'm not going to go this direction upstream anymore. I'm going to stop. I'm going to look in this mirror. I'm going to be honest with myself. And that is an action. Stopping is an action. And then choosing to face whatever is staring back at you. And then choosing to surrender. Surrender is also an action. It doesn't mean give up. It means surrender to the truth of what is, surrender to the reality that is there before you. Stop telling yourselves the stories. Stop being constantly distracted and constantly busy just because you don't want to face the truth of the reality before you. Bringing yourself to this place where you can stop, where you can look, where you can have that honest conversation, where you can surrender into it. And on a couple of times, I did it. On a couple of times, I almost made it. And then I would feel this. I knew when I was on the brink of everything just imploding. I remember standing in my living room. It was in May of 2016. I had already uncovered a lot of things, which I won't get into here. And as I stood there in my home, the home that I raised my family in, I stood there in the middle of that living room, and I remember the moment it hit me where it's like, I'm going to lose everything. I'm going to lose all of this. I'm going to lose what I've worked so hard for. I'm going to lose the marriage. I'm going to lose the family. I'm going to lose the house. I'm going to lose all of this. And it wasn't the physical items that mattered when I say I'm going to lose the house. This was the house I raised a family in. This is our home. And I remember that moment. And I remember that feeling where there was almost a moment of fresh air because I dared to look into that mirror of truth for just a moment. But as quickly as I tasted that breath of fresh air, the fear also rose. And I remember this feeling of I immediately pushed what I was seeing as truth, and I absolutely pushed it away. I remember the energetic feeling of that, where I was just like, woof, no. And I remember this, boom, doubling down and exerting my will. And I remember in that moment standing there and saying, there is no way I'm going down without a last ditch effort. And I ended up hanging on for quite some time after that. But eventually the inevitable will come. I share all of that with you just simply to say, I talk a lot about going with the flow. One of my favorite movies is Planes, Trains, and Automobiles that I watch around Thanksgiving time each year, right, with John Candy and Steve Martin. And, they pair up, and John Candy's always talking about, his character's always talking about, hey, you just got to go with the flow, And Steve Martin's character, no matter what he does, is everything turns into a mess. And it's because John Candy's character has learned to go with the flow, right? While Steve Martin's character is continually going against the flow. He's trying to force his will upon the flow that already is. So here's the beautiful thing about this. This is where I spent most of my life, is in the river. This is a river here, flowing downstream, right? This is the natural flow of the river. Where I lived most of my life was up in this portion. I was going this way, right? And I'm swimming back and forth, and I'm trying to figure out how this thing works. And the funny thing is, it's comical now. All I needed to do was relax, have some honest conversation with myself. But having honest conversation with myself meant I needed to look into that mirror, and meant I needed to face some truths inside that I didn't want to face. I didn't have the coping mechanisms for. I didn't think I did at the time. But at some point, the pain becomes great enough where it forces you. But I spent all my time striving and willing and just hoping around the next corner things were going to get better. Around the next corner, if I can just figure it out, if I can just love more, if I can just give more, if I can just do more. Effort, 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 effort. And I was absolutely exhausted. I was driving home from work, a short drive. Didn't matter if I was in the car for 5 minutes or 20 minutes, but guaranteed I was drifting off while I was driving consistently. I was exhausted. I wouldn't sit down at home a lot because I knew if I sat down, I would fall asleep. And there was always trying to hold everything together all of the time. So what's interesting is what I learned through the implosion of everything that happened. I learned to surrender. I learned to stop. And I learned to take my little raft here. I'll just say this is the raft, right? And instead of trying so hard to figure everything out, instead, I just decided to lay back, to surrender. Now, at first, there was not surrender. At first, there was kind of a collapse, what I would call a collapse, because everything just imploded. At that point, sure, I still had a choice to continue doing the same, but I knew I couldn't go that direction anymore. I'd finally had a metaphorical come to Jesus moment, right? This, and allowing yourself to begin going with the flow rather than in resistance to the flow, requires that honest conversation, and it requires you to surrender, it requires you to let go of all of your stories, to let go of all of your bullshit that you're telling yourself. It requires you to see the actions and the behaviors for what they are, rather than just believing a person's words when their words don't match their actions. I always had the propensity to believe the words and ignore the behavior or the action. Because if I truly took in what the behaviors and actions were saying, it would mean I would have to face certain things within me that I didn't want to face. Going with the flow of all that is, it requires you to surrender. It requires your trust. And each of these things is an act of your will. We think we have been taught to grind, to hustle, to make an effort. So much of our life is built on performance, on going after things, on chasing things, on making them your own, right? But most of that is generally having you go uphill. There's a difference between going after something and executing your will, and executing your will in the opposite direction of where the flow is going, or executing your will in conjunction with the flow. That's where you get synergy. That's where you know you are in alignment. If you were feeling drained, The only thing that can come by going against the stream is exhaustion and becoming drained, because there's so much resistance that you are trying to will yourself through. And those are all cues saying, take a moment, take a breath, step back, pan out from the picture, if you will, right? What is really needed here? There's something that I've been wanting to do in my life lately, and it's come up to me in about the past week or two. And it's even surprised me that it's come into my awareness. So I've been letting it percolate, right? And I thought about this today, and I thought, it's interesting that keeps coming up. Why is that drawing me so much? And why does it feel like I just want to do that? And it's going to be the greatest thing ever. It's going to be simple. It matches me in so many ways. And then I thought about the stream, and I thought, well, where does that fit? And I thought, well, it fits so well because it's me recognizing it and saying, man, that fits so much of who I am. No wonder why this is coming up. It goes right with the flow. I'm not fighting anything in what feels like this little piece that I want to implement in my life. I'm not having to figure anything out. I mean, sure, there's some logistics around pulling it off, but that's fine, because I will follow my discernment and follow my intuition on how this will play out. But all of it is working within the flow, which is why it feels so aligned. I'm not trying to force it. I'm not trying to make it happen. And so if you're looking at your life, a couple of simple things to ask is, are you overall, first of all, are you consistently feeling drained? Right? Or are you consistently feeling energized? Right? Because if more of it is landing over here, then life is probably asking you to slow down, and it's probably asking you to step back, and it's probably trying to get you to look at a few things. Now, I know that life is busy. I know that some things are out of our control. I know that, yes, we have to work. I know that there are times where we have to take care of others in our life because of circumstances that have come up. I know that those things, especially caretaking things, can be and are generally very draining, especially if they go on for very long, right? So we have to look at the context of what is going on as well. But we also have to look at, what are we trying to control in all of this? What are we holding on to in all of this? What are we fighting against in all of this? So looking at if your life is consistently drained or energized, and then you can take that same thing and look at, is this one thing, say this thing that I was describing here, this thing that I want to implement, this thing that I want to do, when you think about it, does it make you feel heavy? Does it make you feel drained? Does it make you feel like, that seems like a lot to figure out? Or does it make you feel like light and energized? Does it feel aligned? Or does it feel like you're just trying to swim upstream to make it happen? Right? Take the time. In life, so much we have just been taught to achieve. And now we have these phones, and phones are great. I'm sitting here recording on one right now. But at the same time, what happens when we have a moment of space? We pull out our phone and we fill the space. And the space, the white space, becomes null and void, because we're now taking in a whole another stream of information somehow. The fact is, life needs white space. You need white space in your life in order to assess where you're at in order to look at where you've been, where you're at, and where you're going. And are you still in alignment? Are the things that you're doing in life, are they draining you, or are they fulfilling you and energizing you on a big overall 100,000-foot level? And then if you come down to one specific thing, is that one specific thing draining you or energizing you? And is there something then, if it's draining you, that you could change in regards to that? Or maybe it's something that you can let go of altogether. Or maybe you need some boundaries around whatever that thing is in order to shift it from being something that drains you into being something that fills you and energizes you. It's a very simple concept, but most of our programming goes in direct opposition to going with the flow. And what I really want to point out here is we've been taught that to will something and to power it through and just to force it and make it happen, right, is the way to go. But I'm here to say your will is involved when you choose to slow down, when you choose to take a moment to breathe, when you choose to put the raft in here and say, you know what? I'm going to choose, instead of taking my will and orienting my will against the resistance, against the stream, I'm going to orient my will right here. And I'm going to use the energy of the stream and the flow that is, and put my will and intention in line with that stream and see what happens, and see how much easier things come to fruition in your life. That's all I have for you. It is way past my bedtime. It is about midnight right now. And so I hope you've had a beautiful July. And in a few minutes, we're going to be heading into August. As always, blessings and love to each of you.